Welcome to They're Out of Their Minds. Who are they? Brought to you by your host, Shannon Jordan. Hello, everyone. This is Shannon, and this is my story of how I met the most evil family on the planet. Six months had gone by, and I was still recuperating from open heart surgery. I was watching TV one night, sitting on my bed with my legs crossed. Then all of a sudden, I feel this electric shock coming from the base of my spine all the way up to the middle of my top of my head. It was like a light switch had just turned on, or something like an electrical shock if you step in water while you're turning on a light. Zip. Then from that point on, my genital area started vibrating. Not a good vibrating either. It's like someone had turned on a machine remotely. It felt like as if, this is an example, like as if you had a car idling inside your body. Vibration, vibrating my whole body cavity, all the way down from my head to my toes. Not a very good feeling. I knew definitely it was not nerves of any kind. It was, you know when you got some kind of device inside of you. This thing had volume control. It would go from low to high. It was awful. I knew that they had done something to me. Because if you remember in the last episode, I kept waking up in different rooms after my heart surgery. So I went to the hospital. It didn't stay on constantly. It was usually at night when I laid down and went to sleep. Or anytime a nap. It wasn't only during nighttime. It was daytime. If I laid down and took a nap. I went to Tulane and requested my medical records and looked through all my medical records, and no such thing, nothing was in there. It said there was no extra device in there. So they had definitely done something to me that I did not consent to. I decided to go to another hospital and find out what this device was, or what was wrong. Since Tulane told me to never come back there, so I decided to go to Ochsner Medical Center off of Jefferson Highway in Metairie. It's considered New Orleans, still Metairie. And my primary doctor took me into x-rays, and they told me nothing. Said, oh, it's just nerves, and put me on painkillers, Neurontin and methocarbam, and refused to show me my x-rays. So then they took me to a pain management doctor within the hospital, and she showed me an x-ray of somebody that had scoliosis. I have never had scoliosis in my life. Shortly after that, I started experiencing some severe pain on my left side, right underneath my rib cage, in the upper small intestines. So they took me and they gave me x-rays, and then they said I needed a procedure. The procedure they wanted to do was an upper endoscopy, where they take a camera, go into your mouth, and they take pictures of your upper intestines. When I arrived at the hospital that day for the procedure, everything seemed normal. Told me to take off my clothes and get into the surgical gown. They put me on, a table, and it was like a gurney. Then all of a sudden, they started moving me. Took me out a door, went down a hall, and I said, where are you taking me? And at the end of the hall, I could see what looked like a broom closet or like a janitor's closet. And I said, I kind of got scared. I was like, where are you taking me? Because I thought I was going to have the procedure where I'd taken my clothes off and got into in the OR room. But like I said, I saw the closet, and all of a sudden I said, where are you taking me? And they took me into the closet. And boom, I was out. They gave me a shot. Boom, I was completely out. And but I could see cleaning products in there, like a mop, and it was so small that my feet were hanging out the door. And then when I had my procedure, when I woke up after my procedure, I couldn't breathe. And I realized that they had turned the anesthesia or the oxygen machine off. I couldn't breathe at all. So I started to reach up to pull the intubation tube out of my mouth. And one of the nurses, because they were just sitting there chit-chatting with each other, slapped my hand and said, you can't take this out. So then, I absolutely had no breathing. My air was completely obstructed. And I had to flail my body around from side to side like a fish. And then, thank God, the anesthesiologist walked up and said, oh, my God, she got sinusy, and pulled the intubation tube out of my mouth. And I was, ah. And he's like, oh, just a little snafu, just a little snafu. And I said, oh, some snafu. And then they wheeled me and took me to the recovery room. And as I was waking up, coming to, a woman in a white pullover shirt and jeans came up and handed me a piece of paper. It had, it was the photos that they had taken from my procedure, the upper endoscopy procedure, one I just had. And she said, I'm not your nurse, I don't work here, but you've got to see this. So I'm looking at it going, okay. Then she heard a noise and ran off. So Scott took me home after the nurse had given me my papers, my discharge papers. And I started thinking back that that nurse who gave me that sheet of paper of my pictures of my upper endoscopy, how familiar she looked. And I was going over the words that she had said, I don't work here and I'm not your nurse, but you got to see this. Well, if she wasn't my nurse and she didn't work there, how did she know about my procedure? In the car, my eyes started feeling funny and they started to swell. And when I got home, they were completely swelled shut, both of them. I called the hospital and complained that why in the world would my eyes be swelled shut? But it didn't go any further. I just called and complained. And I started thinking more about that nurse, how familiar she looked. And it hit me. She was the nurse at my procedure at Tulane, because I saw her every hour on the hour. And I have a photographic memory. And I saw her so many times during my stay at Tulane. She was the same nurse that handed me that piece of paper and said, I'm not your nurse. I don't work here, but you got to see this. That proves that they were on my computers and my phone to know about my procedure. A few months had gone by, and my primary doctor, Dr. Bonner, wanted me to see a parasitologist. And so I made the appointment, went to the parasitologist, and he was the only parasitologist in Louisiana at the time. So when I was in the waiting room, waiting for him in the office, it was a little room, and he came in, and I was like, he looked extremely familiar. When I told him I requested, I'd wanted some more medicine that Dr. Bonner was giving me for parasites, and which I thought I may have one, hence being thrown in sewage, which that's where you would get parasites from, since I was dunked from head to toe. And he got up and screamed 2 inches away from my face and said, "You're not supposed to have any medicine." I'm like, oh my God, who is this guy? Anyway, I kept looking at him like, I know this guy from somewhere. I know him. And then it hit me as I was leaving. He was the same man that was in that nightclub that had given the doctor who threw me in the pit of sewage a pill to drug me. He was the same man sitting in the corner all by himself at Avenue Pub off St. Charles. And at this point, I was really starting to think that this is some kind of major cover-up. So after the experience that I had at Ochsner, I decided I was never going to go back there again. It was looking like it was nothing but a cover-up. I mean, them showing me other people's x-rays, the same parasitologist who was there when I got thrown in sewage at that nightclub, the way he yelled at me, them refusing to give me my x-rays. So then I got my records from Ochsner, and that was it. And there was a woman there who gave me my records, and she kind of was very personable to me. I got a good look at her, and you'll find out why later, how she is a part of this story. Anyway, after that, I decided definitely that I was going to hire an attorney, because there was definitely something inside me that they weren't telling me about that was shocking me every day and every night. So I tried to go to an attorney. His name was Ron Austin. And lo and behold, there was an Ochsner nurse present. So they said they'd look it over, maybe take the case, maybe not. But they called me and told me no, that they were not going to take the case. And I said, okay, well, I need my records back. And she goes, well, we don't have them. It'll take us about a month. We've got them in a warehouse. I'm like, what? Why would you store my records if you weren't going to take my case? So it took them about a month to get my records back. And then when I got them back, they had mixed them all up. They're pretty much unusable. The way it felt to me, it felt like somebody had gotten to him. The nurse being there, them keeping my records for an entire month, mixing them all up. Then I found out he was actually a professor at Tulane University. He taught a course there. But it still felt like they had been paid off. Why was the nurse there? Why did they mix my records up, to where they were unusable? Some weird stuff started really going on. It's looking more and more like a humongous cover-up. Well, I decided that I would definitely keep pursuing to find an attorney to take my case. In the meantime, Scott's father asked us, hey, why don't you go to Panama City? They had a beach house there, take a couple of days off. We really actually didn't want to go, but he was pretty persistent about us going. Like he demanded us to go to Panama City for a few days. I always thought that was kind of strange. Anyway, we went to Panama City, had some fun for a few days, and came back. When I came back to my apartment that we were living in at Harahan at the time, walked in my bedroom, and there was all these blue and red wires. It was about half an inch long, all cut the same length, red and blue, all over my bed. Just like they put buckets of these wires on top of my bed. Someone had broken into my home and dumped these wires on my bed. Extremely strange. I'm like, what the? And Scott acted like, oh, okay, yeah. Kind of nonchalant, like it was no big deal. Most people, it's obviously, I didn't put those there. Obviously, someone had been in our home. You'd think most men would be like, someone's been in our home, broken our home, let's call the police. Not Scott. He just kind of blew it off like it was no big deal. So I definitely was still pursuing to find an attorney in a law firm to take my case. And so I kept calling attorneys after attorneys after attorneys. And then I kept something so familiar about the voices of every single law firm that I called. Sounded like the same woman and the same man. So then finally, I literally called like 40, 50 different law firms. And every time they say, oh, we're not taking any new cases. Sorry. We're not taking any new cases. Sorry. Same man, same woman. Then I called for the last time. Then I got the woman who you think you're talking to a law firm's receptionist or a paralegal. And she finally says, what do you expect to get out of this? And yelled at me. And that's when I knew that I was not speaking to any law firms. That my phone had been forwarded to some other place. Because no law firm, no receptionist or paralegal is going to yell at a potential client. Ever. Even if they're going to take the case or not, they would not say, what do you expect you're going to get out of this? And at the top of their lungs. And like I said, the voice sounded real familiar. A couple months had passed and still pursuing, getting the same runaround from every place I called. We're not taking any cases. Sorry, our pallet's full right now. Scott and I decided to buy a home. So we were going to look on the North Shore. And we bought a home. And unfortunately, it was a half a mile down the street from the most evil family on the planet, Mike and Janine Parker. And then the real story begins. All the evil fun. This is the home that Scott and I bought in Covington on the North Shore. Like I said, it was a half a mile down the street from the evil family, most evil family on the freaking planet. It was kind of a, middle-class neighborhood, quiet when we first moved in. And soon it started to change. A woman and her daughter moved into the right of us at 48 Hollycrest Boulevard. Her name was Julie Fucci and Justine Fucci. Seemed to be very nice, normal mother and daughter. I really cared for her daughter, Justine, sweet as can be. Julie was a teacher and quiet. Like I said, just seemed like normal people. And 3 months after Julie moved in, we had new renters to our left move in. A Robert Walzak and a Miho Jones. And they had their son, Noah Jones, and they had another little boy living with them who said it was his brother, but come to find out it was not their child. They were having other people living and staying there. Everything seemed normal. They seemed like normal neighbors. They were pleasant. Didn't seem to cause any problems, weren't loud. But when we moved in here, we had hired movers. I'd already had them ready to go. But Mike, Scott's father, insisted that he move us himself. I'm like, I've already hired movers. No, we're going to do it. We're going to move you. He's never volunteered to help us move ever, and we'd moved 5 or 6 times in the history of our relationship. But he was determined to move us. And on the last trip, them taking our stuff, they spent 12 hours in the house and didn't come pick me up. Left me in the apartment for 12 hours. So I did think that was really strange, why he insisted that he move us into our home, acting like he was doing us a favor. Right. The Parkers had invited us over for dinner and dinner was kind of always a big family thing and kind of a big elaborate spread. Because Mike, his dad, is a foodie and cooks very well. So anyway, we're sitting down at dinner, and his other two daughters were there, Samantha and Stacy, and Stacy's husband. Well, during the middle of the dinner, having conversation, they started talking about things and repeating things and kind of doing a reenactment of things that happened in the privacy of my own home. And there was just too many of them to be some kind of coincidence. Like my computer crashed and Samantha reenacted it exactly the way it happened to me, repeating things that I had said on the phone. I knew that somehow that they were listening in and watching me, like as if there was cameras in my home because of the way she was reenacting the computer crash. She would have had to seen what happened. I kind of blew it off. I didn't want to overreact because, the Parkers are kind of forced to be reckoned with. But a series of strange things just started to happen. Like Scott and I went to a Mexican restaurant. And I said, yeah, Scott, I want to get some chips and salsa on the way home. That sounds really good to snack on. So we forgot to go to the store. So anyway, the next day, Scott comes home with some chips and salsa and says, my dad told me to bring this to you. And I had my phone sitting right there with us at the table when we were eating at the restaurant. And he just acted like it was no big deal. I'm like, this is weird. It means it's like they were trying to tell me, hey, we're listening and we're watching you. Another time we went over to their house for dinner. It was Christmas time. And Scott had given me a watch the year before. And one of the gifts that she had given me this Christmas was another watch. But the way she was looking at me was like a Cheshire cat that had just ate a canary. Like, get it? Watch? Like, we're watching you. They're like terrorists. Like signing their work, like letting you know we're watching you, like to intimidate me. And really, really strange stuff started happening. People in their home that I'd never seen before. One time, Janine looked a little taller and prettier. Much taller, actually. You'll understand why when I tell you who these people were. It wasn't Janine. They'd come in for a few minutes and then leave, and then the real Janine would come out. Someone was dressed in disguise, looking just like her. And it was a man. At this point, I'm putting two and two together. But still kind of in denial, thinking that is it possible that his parents have something to do with what happened to me? I don't know, but it was just too weird. I invited them. They'd never been to our house, so we had a dinner party, and I invited them, her, Mike, Janine, and Samantha. And a real nice dinner party. I spent a lot of money on it. I cooked veal marsala. Anyway, dinner conversation went fine. Everything was great. Then Scott and Janine went outside and were sitting on the patio talking. And Mike and Samantha were in the living room. Then all of a sudden I look around and nobody's there. Nobody's in the living room. And Scott and Janine are still outside. So I got back in the kitchen. Then all of a sudden what looks like Janine walks into the kitchen and sits down at one of the chairs. Looked just like her. He sat down. He was a man dressed like Janine. Sat down, opened his legs, sat like a man, put his hands behind his head, and then squinted at me. He let me know that he was a man. I'm assuming it was some kind of bodyguard I do not know why all of a sudden everybody left. So that means Mike and Samantha had to let him in the door. Because when he walked out the door. I went back to, in the back, opened the back door where Scott and Janine were talking, and there was Janine. It was not her. It was a transvestite. This is the second time that I'd seen two different men dressed up and looked, I mean, I'm telling you, so much like her. It was unbelievable. I had no idea why this was going on, for what purpose, but it was extremely strange. But the story will unfold, and now, later on, you'll understand. Stay tuned for my third episode of The Most Evil Family on the Planet. And believe me, it keeps getting stranger and stranger.